Steven Rothberg, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. Excited to have you here today.
Hey, Govind, it's great. Looking forward to the discussion.
So, I liked your paper napkin when you sent it across. It got past my team and to me pretty quickly, but I don't think the color of ink you used was accidental. It was written in green, and your message, which was, if a customer wants to give you more money, find a way of making that happen. And then there's $4 signs on the bottom. And like I said, it's written in green ink. So why did you share that with me?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I suppose it's also very unlikely that you're colorblind because you picked up on the green. Definitely green for money. Where this came from is I was at a presentation by Guy Kawasaki, who I think became really famous as an evangelist for Apple, and he's now a big investor in tons of different companies. And he did a presentation on how to give a presentation. It was like the most brilliant thing I had ever seen in my life. But one of the things he talked about was that in some of the startups that he's invested in, that he finds that some of the entrepreneurs are just naturally very oriented to the customer. The customer has a request. The entrepreneur may not be able to fulfill it, but they're going to try really hard. And then he talked about kind of generally about one company he had invested in, and he kind of blurred the facts to protect the guilty, if you will. And he said that they basically had a product that was perfectly legal, perfectly moral, and rarely used by its customers with the intended purpose. And he said, like, picture this. It's like, think of it like they're selling a knife, and everybody is using that knife as a screwdriver. And what he found was that the entrepreneurs that were making the knife were asking their customers, do you intend to use it as a screwdriver? The customers said yes, and the entrepreneurs would not sell it. And it would drive him nuts. It's like, who cares that they're using it as a screwdriver? Is it legal? Is it yes? Is it moral? Yes. Sell the damn thing to them. I took that to heart. We've had over the years, and I founded the business in 1991, so 34 years ago. But over the years, we've had dozens and dozens of requests from customers. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Can you do that? And most of the time, they're very reasonable. They're really, really good requests. And they help us sort of improve our product, not just for that customer, but for others. Occasionally, they're just wacky. And the hard part is in that moment, trying to be able to figure out, is this something that we want to make money on? Or is this something that we want to pass on? But generally the requests are pretty good. It also comes into play in terms of like literally receiving payment. I'm always amazed at when you walk into a restaurant and they do not accept credit cards, right? They want to save on that 3% discount fee. But the result is if somebody has $40 in their wallet, that's the most that they're going to be able to spend. Where if you allow them to use a credit card, maybe they would have spent $100. So I think it's really short-sighted when business leaders don't try really hard to accommodate the requests of their customers.
You touched on a bunch of really important points, and before we began, again, green is going to come up. We were in the green room, and we were talking about you're from Winnipeg originally, now in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
and we talked about you gave me the acid test of your Winnipeg roots by talking about the size of the black flies and mosquitoes that carry people away in the summertime there. But one of the things that we talked about was that you love the concept of paper napkin wisdom because it's really
Yeah.
sticky, right? One of the things I love about Kawasaki is his 10-20-30 rule, right? Which obviously you know about. And the 10-20-30 rule, for people who are listening and aren't familiar with this, um, he suggested that as an investor pitch deck, if you're going to make a pitch deck for any purpose, but especially for investment, 10 slides. He gives an outline of what those 10 slides should be. It should be 20 minutes, not 30 minutes, 20 minutes, because you want to have time at the end of your meeting.
Mm,
And He also goes on to say you should never schedule 30-minute meetings. It should always be 20 minutes because you want to have a buffer. And if it's an hour, you should be 45 minutes. But then the last thing is 30-point font. And
Yes.
this aligns with me very well because if you want to understand something, you have to express it simply. So he says you should be able to describe your entire business in 30-point font and 10 slides. And if you can't do that, you don't get it. You won't get money and you won't get the business. You don't understand your business well enough. And I think you could take a piece of that and relate it to what you latched onto, right? Because if you understand your business well enough, then you understand and you should be humble enough to get the customer's perspective on, hey, I can use it for this,
Hmm.
right? Again, caveat, so long as it's legal, moral, and ethical,
Hmm.
I can do this. So there's that humility and understanding your business, but there's something subtle in your napkin, which is find a way of making that happen. Doesn't mean that you just snap the finger and give it the way that they want it to be
Right.
done. It's about finding a way that's a win-win from a sort of like this abundant, unlimited, you know, you don't have to win for me to lose. If you win, I don't
Hmm.
lose, and if I win, you don't lose. There's a cooperative element to that, isn't there?
100%. My wife and I have three kids. They're all grown. And you'll understand where I'm going with this in just a second. They're all grown, but they all had an elementary school teacher, one wonderful woman named Julie Baker.
Mhm.
And Julie used to say, life is not a zero-sum sport. You don't have to have a loser in order for somebody to be a winner. She also talked about life being a participation sport, which is a little bit different. But I've always believed that the best way of conducting yourself, both in your professional and in your personal life, is to look for win-win scenarios. Can I make you better while also making myself better? Can the world be a little bit of a better place by something that we do? And it it's always it's really troubling. I'm actually dealing with a situation like that right now where stereotypically, big New York law firm, you get a contract from them, and the word that comes to my mind is egregious. It's so one-sided. It's just needless how one-sided it is. And if you push back and redline and try to make it more reciprocal, mutual, balanced, 9 times out of 10, they'll accommodate you. But why not just approach the business relationship like that to begin with? Their client wants to partner with us. The lawyer is trying to screw us over. And
Mhm.
that's just sort of, it's not us. It's just that's the way they view the world, winners and losers. And I just, at the end of the day, I'm not going to go to my grave saying that I won because we got an extra couple $1,000 out of that sale. But I will go to my grave saying I won because I left the world a little bit of a better place. And that means you need to look for win-win scenarios.
Right. It's ironic that you talk about New York lawyers because one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from one of my first lawyers that I had in my company, which was based in New York at the time. And he said to me, he said, depending upon what side of the coin you're on, if you want to win in any legal argument, come in with your highest and best offer. If you're buying something or if you're selling something, your lowest and best offer. And if you go in with your best offer, people know it.
Hmm.
People can feel it. And there's some of that intent brewed into what you're saying, isn't there?
Absolutely. A tactic that I've used occasionally along those same lines where I feel like I'm dealing with somebody that's going to be like really hard to work with in that sense is I'll say to them, I'll literally say, like in the email, in the conversation, whatever, this is my best offer. Um, I'm not going to negotiate. It's a yes or a no. Or I'll flip the coin. Give me your best offer. I won't negotiate. It will be a yes or a no. I might do that a couple of times a year. But there are times where, that business is so important to win, whether you're buying or whether you're selling, that you just have to cut to that lowest common denominator. Um, I definitely prefer to do business with organizations that charge the same thing to all of their customers, pay the same kind of thing. It's just standard, right? We're not out here because, hey, Steven's company looks like it has a lot of money, so we're going to charge them more, or it doesn't have as much money, we're going to charge them less. Like, I don't want to deal with a used car salesperson negotiating over floor mats. Um, I want to get their product. I want to sell them our product and move on and actually get that into use. The dicking around with nickels and dimes, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, and one of the things to notice, if you're an entrepreneur and you're scaling your business, we sell like we buy and we buy like we sell.
Mm.
Right. So it would seem to me that you have that holistic view and you're conscious of that in what you're saying. But there's something that's sort of like I think it's also really important to talk about with your napkin because you say if the customer wants to give you more money, find a way of making that happen. Is that does that mean that you're a busker on the street letting everyone fill your hat no matter who they are?
No, no, definitely not. It's more like that Guy Kawasaki scenario with, they're making knives, people are using them as a screwdriver. And I'll give you another example. So, I think it was about 5, 6 years ago, we started to really expand internationally. Lo and behold, customers in France, Germany, etc., prefer to pay in euros.
Mhm.
Who could have guessed
Who
that they would
would have
want to
guessed?
use their own currency? And as somebody, well, like you said earlier, somebody who grew up in Canada moved to the US, I understand that there is a world outside of American borders and that it matters. And so if we're dealing with a Canadian company, do we prefer to pay or be paid in US dollars? Absolutely. But we recognize that they do on the flip side too. They prefer to buy or pay in Canadian dollars.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that we did because we were doing more and more international business is that we looked for a vendor that would allow our customers to pay them in their local currency. That vendor would convert that currency and pay us in US dollars, and the same in reverse. And it functions almost like a credit card. You pay a little bit of a discount fee, but we don't have to then look for a Canadian company to be wiring money to us. They can mail a check, they can pay with a credit card, they can pay with some kind of electronic fund transfers in Canadian dollars or receive our payment in Canadian dollars. It's made it so much easier to do business across borders. And to me, that's a really good example of if they want to give you more money, help them do it. So by helping a Canadian company pay us in Canadian dollars or be paid in Canadian dollars, it smooths out those speed bumps.
Right, right. So what's an example of a customer who came to you and sort of gave you the, where did you learn this lesson first or most significantly? What pops to mind?
Um, w- Probably the biggest win that I've ever had by applying this rule is years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, we were competing with a direct competitor to win business. A big
And
U.S.
you're in the
federal.
college recruiting business.
Yeah, so our customers are employers, mostly Fortune 500 and government agencies that advertise jobs with us. And they use us to help them hire early career talent, 0 to 5 years of experience. Some of them are college or university students, some of them graduated, some of them are ex-military or people who are changing careers or they raised their family and they're going back into the workforce. But this particular customer was a federal government agency, really big, household name. In fairness to them, I won't mention who they are, but trust me, you know them. And they were debating whether to give us part of the budget and a direct competitor part of the budget, or just give it to one or the other. Their concern was that the product that we would deliver, the value we would deliver, that there would be overlap. That they were basically going to be buying some of the same things twice by our competitor reaching the same candidates that we were. So they were asking about how much of an overlap is there between what we do and what our competitors do? Are we going to reach different candidates? And what I said to them is, yeah, we're going to reach some different candidates, but we're also going to reach some of the same people twice. And there's just no way of knowing because we don't know what candidates are using their site at any given time. They don't know what candidates are using our site at any given time. I said to the customer, what would it take for us to win the entire business? All of it. And she's like, give me an hour. I'll come back to you. I think she went to her boss. She came back. She named the price. And I said, great. I'll send you the contract. What she gave me kind of goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago. It was like, this is an accept. I can't remember how she put it, but basically, if you can give us this, the business is yours. And it was reasonable. Could I have like negotiated really hard and retained a New York lawyer and maybe got $3,000 more? No, but it was a $200,000 deal. So bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and they remain a customer to this day.
Right. So that's a great example of a customer wanted to give you a big win, a big
Yeah,
contract in the online recruiting business. I'd imagine a $200,000 contract doesn't drop down in your lap every single day,
highly unusual.
right?
Yeah,
So this is a big employer uh, getting lots of candidates. This this is a big win, right?
huge.
And probably changed your business a little bit.
It was at the time, it was the biggest single transaction we'd ever done.
That's amazing. So let's talk about how then you apply that to a place where you maybe didn't make it happen.
Hmm.
Um, can you think of a time where a client came to you with an offer or a proposal or something like that that you didn't take?
Yeah, it actually happens very often. I would say probably once a week, we will get a request for something that we simply cannot deliver. Um, one that comes to mind was about a week ago. A customer came to us and basically said that they would like to buy our candidate database. We'll write you a check and, give us all the candidates in your database and we'll write you a really nice check. And the answer to that is no. Um, we have the legal right to do that. We've never done that. As long as I'm here, we're not going to do that. There's a really big difference in my mind between an employer advertising a job, a candidate looking at that job posting ad and saying, I want to apply. I'm opting in. I want that employer to have my data. Or even a candidate, like if you go to LinkedIn, right? People put up a LinkedIn profile because they want to get contacted. You just know that when you're using LinkedIn. You are choosing to make your data publicly
Well,
available.
it's like pinning your business card to a wall
Hun-
at the grocery store.
Hundred,
Yeah,
hundred
you're
percent
not doing it to be anonymous.
correct. Yeah, you put yourself out there. You are asking people to get your data to contact you. Nothing wrong with that, as long
No.
as you understand that and that's what you want. But I don't think that people come to a job search site like an Indeed or a college recruiter or whatever and think that they're going to be part of a data dump, where here's the full data on millions of people. Thanks very much for your money, Mr. Staffing Company. So we just don't do that. So that one I said no to. We didn't even get into a dollars and cents issue. I have no idea if they were going to give us $5,000 or $500,000 or $5 million. It just didn't matter. We just don't do that.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting because your napkin says if a customer wants to give you more money, find a way of making that happen.
Hmm.
And you just gave me a firm no. I'm not thinking about it. It doesn't matter if it's $5 or 5 million. I'm still saying no. So it runs counter to it, but it really doesn't run counter to it because it's about alignment with who you are and what business you think you're in, right? And what you believe in, what your values are, what why you're in business.
I totally agree with that, and I'll just add to that. I wouldn't call that a customer.
Mm. Why?
Um,
Because I mean,
because
you're
to
saying
me,
someone wants to give you money.
well, I'm not saying if someone wants to give you money. I'm saying if a customer wants to give you money.
Okay,
Okay, so
let's talk about the
you own
difference,
you own a steak shop.
right?
I walk into your restaurant and I say, I want to buy your oven. Are you in the business of selling ovens?
Yeah, that's a good
No.
point.
And if you're not in the business of selling ovens and I'm asking to buy an oven, am I a customer? I don't think so. I think I'm a guy on the street who walked in the wrong door and you need to point me to the appliance shop down the street. And the same thing here. There are companies that sell mailing lists. Perfectly well. I was going to say perfectly legitimate business. It can be a sleazy industry. Um,
And there's
but
some really
the
good players in there. Like we've used some good players.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But it is an industry where there are just sort of known to be a lot of sleazeballs.
Yep,
And unfortunately, they tarnish the image of the whole industry to the detriment of everybody in that industry. Um, I defy you to find any industry at all where there aren't any bad players, right? It's a spectrum.
yep,
But in this case, I definitely choose the word customer carefully.
yeah.
If somebody were to come to us and say, "Hey, Steven, you're going to be traveling to Belgium for work. I'll give you $100,000 if you'll bring back a bag of fentanyl for me." That's not a customer.
No,
I'm not in the business of selling fentanyl.
right, right. Um, and less illicitly Belgian beer, which is fantastic.
Oh,
So,
no, okay. So that would be another story. So about a dozen years ago, had the good fortune of going to Belgium for a week for work. I
mhm.
took two suitcases with me, and one of them was empty. And on the way back, it was filled with Trappist monastery beers and bubble wrap. Did you do you know off the top of your head how many bottles of beer it takes to make up 70 pounds? I do.
That's fantastic. That's so good.
It was 112 bottles of beer.
Yeah, you think very, very similarly to me. Um, but I really think this is interesting, and also in the green room before we started, we were talking about how revenue's vanity, and I think that sometimes
Mm.
we get caught up in the vanity of revenue. And you pushed back right away and says, "Does your accountant agree with you
Yeah.
that revenue's vanity?" And I said, "Well, over time, I've got them conditioned to remember that profit is
Yeah.
sanity and cash is king." And
Yeah.
and you smiled, and we said that we could have a conversation about that because I think that what you're saying is something similar. You can't just get caught on the revenue.
Right.
It has to be a customer. And a customer infers that once you sell them whatever you're going to sell them, or once you engage with them, once you have a relationship with them, you're going to be able to provide value to them again and to
Hmm.
someone else again in the same way. And if you sell your oven or you sell your grill and you're in the business of cooking food, you probably can't serve the next customer, right?
That's exactly right. The Yeah, the conversation we were having, it's one that I think probably most business people that have experience really grasp the difference between a gross profit margin and gross profit in dollars or whatever the currency is, euros, pounds, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, until a few years ago, well, for about 2 years, based on some advice that we got from an advisor, we were trying to improve our gross profit, the margin, the percentage. So there are probably some people in the audience that don't really know what that is, right? It's like your gross revenue minus your cost of goods sold is your gross profit in dollars, and the percentage is the margin. And in our industry, the standard is somewhere between 60 and 80% is a gross profit margin. We were at about 45%.
Hmm.
So the advisor was telling us, looking back, understandably so, you got to get that gross margin up. If you want to be competitive, if you want your financials to be better, you got to be in that at least 55, preferably 60, 65, maybe 70% range. What the advisor didn't appreciate was that our gross profit in dollars was actually going to suffer if we did that. Because what that led us to do is to bring on a whole bunch of customers that were spending a lot of money, but so the revenue went up, but the business that we did with them was barely profitable. Sometimes it even caused us to lose money.
Mm.
So once you've sort of factored in the additional revenue and we greatly increased the number of customers, the revenue per customer went way down, the gross margin went up, but our gross profit in dollars, which is what pays the bills, that suffered.
Yeah, I
And when
think
we
you're talking about net profit, right? After like your bottom line suffered.
Well, the bottom line also suffered, but in order to, your payroll, your office expense, that kind of stuff comes out below that gross profit
Correct.
line.
That's
That's the
right.
expenses, right?
Yeah.
But in order to have money to pay those expenses, you have to have good gross profit dollars.
Yeah.
So what we ended up
Oh, I see what
finding,
you're saying. Your
yeah,
margin went up, but your total dollars went up because your customer mix changed.
yeah, exactly. So the margin went up, the dollars went down for gross profit.
Right.
And what that led us, and sorry for saying it in a confusing way, what that led us to do when we could see what was happening, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're tight on cash. What's going on? Revenue's up, margins up. We should be flush with cash. And when we really started to dig into it and look at the customers that we had sort of shifted towards, we found that we had a whole lot of customers that were really small and we were not able to generate much in terms of gross profit in dollars. The margins were good, but we'd have, instead of having a customer that was spending $30,000 with us and maybe a 30% margin, we had customers that were spending $300 with us and a 60% margin. Well, I would much rather have that former than the latter. I'd rather have $500,000 in revenue and $200,000 in gross profit than $1 million in revenue and $100,000 in gross profit. So we basically fired a whole bunch of customers. We looked at them. Is this a customer that we can really increase the gross profit in dollars from? Like, who cares what they've done to date? What matters is moving forward.
Hmm.
And if we felt like it was incredibly unlikely that we could make them much more profitable in terms of dollars, then we just basically said, sorry, we're going to move on. And this is another company that you can use, or we just can't take this business anymore, or something along those lines. We didn't burn bridges, but we definitely fired customers.
Yeah, and you gave them a safe place to land. You gave them somewhere else to go, but you didn't
Yeah,
you weren't interested
yeah.
in.
And it's a highly competitive industry. I mean, it would almost be like, well, like in your neck of the woods, like if Tim Hortons came to you and said, like, we're not going to sell you coffee anymore, would you have any difficulty figuring out where you could get a cup of coffee?
No, and I contend that I can't get a cup of coffee at Tim Hortons. So
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I'm definitely talking to a true Canadian.
yeah. Tim's has changed. Tim's has changed. Um, it's still a rite of passage in the arenas, in many of the arenas around the country. But I'd be happy to go elsewhere.
Well,
But but your point
they
is well
make
made, right? Like it's
their coffee is very delicious tea.
yes, exactly. Um, so that's really interesting. What would you say? How nimble are you in moving towards those new markets and these
Mm.
opportunities? If your customer wants to give you more money, tell me about the process, how the speed with which you work in those environments.
Yeah, so our business, like most in our industry, is much more tactical for our customers than strategic. So when we have a customer who comes to us or we go to them and they're looking to buy stuff, the stuff that we deliver, it almost always is going to be delivered within a month or two.
Mm,
There are definitely other industries like, buying a home, buying a car, where that purchase is used for years. Um, you know, you're you're a manufacturing company and you're thinking about like moving your warehouse. Like you're not going to move a warehouse for a month or two. You're looking at that as probably decades.
right.
We don't have that. So we can be a lot more nimble just by the nature of our industry than some others. But so for example, the customers that we fired, we didn't have to wait more than weeks to sort of to end that business. And it is a much more complicated process for us to enter a new market. So for example, when our business used to be entirely in the US and Canada, and we started to get requests from customers saying basically, hey, you're helping us hire finance majors in the US, and we're happy with you. We also have similar rules in the UK. One of the big four accounting firms like literally said that.
Mhm.
And can you help us there? Well, at the moment that they asked, the answer was no. And we missed that whole recruiting season. So we had to basically wait a year to go back to them because entering a new market like the UK in our industry takes months,
Mm.
not years, not days. And so basically said to them and kind of kept them in the loop. Great idea. We're going to be doing this. No, we can't help you in 2 weeks, but we're going to keep you updated so that a year from now, you're going to be buying from us. And that worked very well. We were able to go back to that fairly small number of customers, but large customers. And just by kind of keeping them in the loop in our progress, telling them that we were going to be ready for them when their next budgetary cycle happened, that pretty much ensured that we were going to win our share of that business.
I think you shared something that a lot of people don't do very well, right?
Hmm.
You said yes, and we're going to keep you informed as to how
Oh
we
yeah.
do, right? That progress piece, volunteering transparency, volunteering progress to your client is sometimes really uncomfortable for entrepreneurs and for business owners and for small and growing businesses to do because it's not a straight line. You might have thought that the first time you were doing it, it was going to be 2 weeks and it turned out to be 2 months.
Hmm.
And you got to go back and say, oh, okay, that didn't work out. We're not really good at giving no news as news,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? But it sounded like you got to a place where you understood the rigor and the need to be able to be proactive in that communication, right?
Yeah, 100%. Accountability is a bitch. It's also your best friend.
Right.
So, when you tell a customer, an employee, a business partner, whatever, I'm going to do X by Y date, there's no shame in going back to them and saying, hey, something happened, right? I got sick. There was an unexpected development. The country just to the south of us threw on all these tariffs, whatever it might be. And just say, at the time I made that prediction, at that time I gave you that guidance, it absolutely was to the best of my knowledge. I now know more. The facts have changed and therefore the timeline changes. Sometimes that works out for the better. Like I was just before we jumped on, I was emailing with a potential vendor and I was 100% expecting not to hear back from this person for a week because
Mm.
that's been kind of the cadence. Ask them some complicated questions. They need to talk to the developers. They come back with answers. And instead, this time I got the answer back in 10 minutes. Well, that shortened that whole discussion by a week. Turned
Right.
it's going to turn around faster. Similarly, with talking to customers, with talking to vendors and giving them guidance. Hey, we can't do this for you today. We can't do this for you in a couple of weeks, but I think we should be ready in 6 to 8 months. What I've coached our employees to do there is if I think that it's going to take, say, 6 months, then I'll tell the customer seven, maybe
Mm.
even eight. Because if it does take the 6 months that I was expecting, I look like a freaking hero.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if it does take 2 or 3 weeks longer, and now it's almost 7 months, and I told them it's 7 months, I'm still a hero. If it does take the full 7 months, now I've met my promise. And as soon as I realize it's going to take longer than 7 months, I'm very proactive and I've coached our employees to be the same at month 3. Hey, it looks like it's going to be 9 months. Tell the customer, tell the vendor, tell your coworker. One of our core values is to err on the side of over communicating.
Mm.
And that can be annoying sometimes. Sometimes it'll be, you kind of get the feeling that the person on the other end is basically saying, shut up, don't bother me, just come to me when you're ready. But for every one of those, I think there are 100 people who are really appreciate the transparency, the accountability, and that expectations. Like, if you email me and you think I'm going to be able to get back to you in an hour, but it's something that is going to take a few days. If I tell you right away, hey, I'll have this back to you by Tuesday, you're not bugging me tomorrow. Hey, where's that proposal?
Or
You
you're not
know that it's
thinking
going
that
to
it,
be Tuesday.
or you're not thinking that it's not important. And this is the
Yeah.
thing. I think no news is news, and people
Yes.
people don't get into the rigor of communicating no news. So I love how your bias towards over communication and transparency, because it really does create the foundation for a lasting relationship with your clients.
Yeah. And I get to wear out a lot of keyboards. So that's fun too.
Yeah, yeah. Fun for the keyboard makers like Logitech. Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot there, and there's a lot of a lot of discipline and rigor to it. And I think also what you're saying, and you're saying it pretty clearly, is that the things that you're saying yes to require you to say no to other things. So every
Oh, yeah.
great yes is defended by 1,000 no's, and you're defending your yeses. The things that the core parts of your business, you're defending them.
Yes. And it can be uncomfortable at times,
Right.
without a doubt. There are definitely times every day where I will be like, I should really be doing that. I should really have time to do this.
Mhm.
And I just need to sort of continually remind myself it doesn't come without a cost. If I spend an extra hour on something related to you, that's an hour less that I have for something else. And it's hard to find an entrepreneur who is not pressed for time. I think
Mm.
that time for most entrepreneurs is their most precious commodity. And what that means to me is we have to prioritize. We can't do everything well. We can't do everything. I think that some people are just better than others at and being okay saying no.
Mhm.
Or sometimes it's a I can't do it now, but I can do it in 2 weeks. Like when we were booking this interview, right? If I had said, "Hey, I'm available right now," you would have said, "Well, that's nice, but I'm not."
Right.
Here are the times when I am available. Again, win-win, right? We had to find a time, a day and a time where it worked for both of us. It did. It wasn't hard to do that, and it worked well. But if I try to do everything, then I'm doing nothing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we run around um, creating unnecessary pressure and noise way too often by
Yeah.
by failing to understand the places that give us greatest leverage. And I think that this conversation helps will help our community, and will help a lot of entrepreneurs out there understand where that could be and how to do that. Um, Stephen, I appreciate you joining me, and this is the part of the show where we pay forward gratitude. A few years ago, well, 10 years ago, John Rulin, a great friend of the show, gave us a paper napkin. What you appreciate appreciates. He went on to write a book called Giftology, which started a movement of gratitude that really made a positive dent in the universe. With that in mind, he passed suddenly about a year ago, and we've been paying forward his message to us by asking all our guests to lay some appreciation out there, spread some appreciation out in the world. Is there someone you'd like to shout out, someone you'd like to appreciate today?
Yeah. My wife, who's also my business partner, she's our CEO and CTO. She came on. Um, she was not involved in the business before we got married in '93. Yes, I'm that old. And she had been a KPMG consultant in their information technology area, then worked for now what's Wells Fargo. And so when she came into our company, she had a much stronger technical background than I did, but much more significantly, she was way better at managing people and enjoyed it. I'm really bad at managing people and I really hate it. So by becoming my business partner and taking on those areas of responsibility, it really freed me up to do what I'm best at. So she has her area and loves it. I have my area and love it. And I'm grateful every hour of every day for that.
That's wonderful. Well, Stephen, I'm grateful you spent time with me today. Thank you.
Thank you.